Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So we are back again with another top 10 list. This time it's Mystic class, which I deem to be the second strongest class in the game right now. And that means we only have Science left and then the overall top 20 champions in the game. All that said, it is mandatory to remind you guys that these lists are a mixture of my own personal thoughts and opinions, as well as current game relevance and trends. These lists effectively focus on the champions that are getting used the most by the most competitive players in the most competitive game modes. Any champion or many champions can do great in like Act 8. You can, pick up a Ronin skill version and, do some decent things with it. But, realistically, nobody's playing or hardly anybody's playing Ronin when losing matters. And that is the essence of these lists in general right now. These are the champions that people use when losing matters, when losing has consequences. That would be Battlegrounds, that would be Alliance War, that would be a few other places in the game. But effectively, these champions are the ones that see the most game time, the most usage from the hardcore, most skilled, most competitive players for very good reasons, as they answer the current problems of the game, whether that be current defenders, current node combinations, current sagas, so on and so forth. And effectively, these are the champions that get the catalyst. These are the champions that you invest in with the rarest resources in the game and choose to rank up. That is it. En masse. And there's always an argument, why is this champion not in the top 10? And they're amazing. And yeah, they can be for you, and there is absolutely no doubt that any player who significantly invests in learning a champion from A to Z, to every matchup and to every interaction, will get better results with that champion. I think Swede and a ton of other content creators have proved that with the amazing things that he was doing with the champion or with the rogue or Kamal Khan or something like that. But by no means those champions were good. It was just that the player was good and extremely skilled and comfortable with the champions that he was using. Not to mention that it often was not the easiest way to achieve something by far, which is exactly the reason why we don't see these champions at the competitive stages of the game. Another thing to note and point out is I seem to have some sort of cough and cold, so I will have a fairly rough voice throughout the video. And if my voice breaks here and there, then definitely please do bear that in mind. Lastly, let's take a look at the old Mystic Top 10 list that has shifted absolutely dramatically. I do think with the Mystic Top 10 list, another super important thing is and has been the availability of 7-star levels, because the champions, looking back at the old list, who have not gotten released as 7 stars pretty much unanimously has lost spots and lost rankings in these lists, with a couple of exceptions. But previously, I ranked Abs as a top Mystic in the game because I genuinely felt like that. However, since he has absolutely fallen off because of the AI, because of the new defensive threats that he just does not answer anymore, when Abs was released, he was dealing with virtually all or most of the rough defensive champions that we had. Now, since Serpent is here and he's in the greatest Serpent matchup, now since, Onslaught's here, he's in the greatest Onslaught matchup, now since Bullseye's here, he's in the greatest Bullseye matchup, now since Photon's here, he's in the greatest Photon matchup, we see a lot less of Abs, is what I'm trying to say. Dr. Doom was still kind of hanging on to his popularity, but now with 7-star rank 3s and rank 2s becoming the mainstay, Dr. Doom definitely has kind of like fallen behind as well. We do see him recently, though, with a couple of metas, he has been quite compatible. Tigra, Jugs, Chavez, Sasquatch, the Hood, Rintra, Kushala, and Longshot. Now, this list definitely has changed. So let's get into the nitty-bitty gritty and take a look at the Mystic class at large, because there will be a ton of very, very good champions that do not make the top 10. That's just the nature of this list. No matter how much I personally would like or appreciate some champions, there's only 10 spots and no more. And when people in the comment section love to kind of like scream at me, this and that champion not making top 10 is absolutely criminal, you also need to tell me like which champions deserve to be cut or deserve to be out of the list in that case. Because, for instance, like Destroyer, I do have a 7-star rank 2. He can be decent. He does some solidly well on defense, as long as people don't learn how Dex is level 2. When people learn how Dex is level 2, he becomes fairly vanilla defender in most cases. And there's always kind of something that kind of disturbs him from being a very, very good offensive option. For instance, currently he's suffering from the fact that he doesn't have willpower and a whole bunch of other things. Overall, I think he's a solid champion. I think he's good. I just don't think he's great. And again, I do have that champion and I use that champion. Another champion that I like a lot, I absolutely enjoy using, is White Tiger. I have brought her in Alliance Wars. I used her for AW Showcase here as well. I used her in Battlegrounds. And the problem with White Tiger is she doesn't match up with many of the most needed and requested matchups well. She is great. She is very fun to use. But with AI being as unpredictable as it is and loving to shoot specials in the block, with, again, just the way she matches up, realistically, she doesn't take many of the champions you'd want a Mystic champion to take. She can't even do Maestro very well because glancing does stop her power gain, and without that, she gains power very, 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 very slowly. I mean, you can kind of get that fight done, but it's not great. And that's kind of the problem with White Tiger. That's why I was incredibly upset not to see her get tuned up. Because it seems like she was designed to be, you know, average or slightly above average. An incredibly fun champion, but, you know, we don't rank up champions based on who we find fun. For instance, I think Carnage is one of the most fun champions to play. Doesn't mean I'm going to be going all in on Carnage. Obviously, she's better than Carnage objectively. And there are things that she does very well. For instance, I do like her power steal and the way she can spam special attacks. But overall, I think she's this close to being great. At the moment, I think she's fine, she's solid, she has her uses at her time, and that's about it. And another champion that's making comeback right now, Symbiote Supreme, due to Serpent and Maestro and a handful of other champions that he just seems to be countering extremely well. So Symbiote Supreme definitely has already made some comeback, and if he stays there, he will absolutely make the next top 10 list as well. And another defender that seems to be regaining some popularity is Kindred. I feel like Kindred's being helped tremendously with the super quick AI recovery times and the AI issues that we're experiencing, because there are so many champions that just struggle or are incapable of punishing his level 1 now because of how fast AI recovers, that he has become significantly bigger threat defensively. On top of that, whenever you're fighting a high Sig Awakened Kindred, there's always a chance that you're going to get caught with your pants down when he goes below 5% and you do not have a bar of power. You're going to end up taking a whole bunch of degen damage. But at the same time, like, if you know what you're doing and if the fight goes fine, Kindred can be nuked by such a large army of champions, so I don't think he's quite up there with the top 10 champions. And the last shout out I wanted to give out to Mephisto, kind of. Mephisto is making a slight comeback as well, because Human Torch has seen a drastic decline in use, and that Human Torch was pretty much single-handedly the reason Mephisto wasn't, like, you know, dominant defender for a while. And now that Human Torch is gone, Mephistos are kind of making a comeback, but him not being out as a 7-star is kind of hurting him with that, I think. And the final champion is gonna be the Moo himself. Where is Rintra? I'm blind all of a sudden, but I cannot seem to find the cow. Oh my god. I genuinely cannot find Rintra. Here we go. Rintra was dominant Mystic Defender pretty much for quite a while, but he isn't. There are far too many champions that can absolutely nuke him in generic circumstances now, and Science is one of the strongest classes in the game now that, you know, many of the champions have a great time against Rintra, and he just, one of the biggest points of Rintra being dominant defender was the fact that he was about as chunky as things could be. Now 7-star rank 3s existing and 7-star rank 2s becoming more commonplace in competitive game, he just doesn't deliver the same level of intimidation factor and the defensive chunk. If he gets released as a 7-star, I do believe we're going to see a lot of him again, but not until then. Rintra is a perfect example of those champions where, you know, being at the highest possible rank and rarity level matters a lot. And as long as he doesn't exist as a 7-star, that is impossible for him. but I do believe that could easily be rectified with him becoming a 7-star again. People would rank him up, and he would also be, again, a defensive nightmare. Spot number 10 is going to be quite a huge fall off, but that's where I feel the game has moved. For spot number 10, we're going to be looking at Dr. Doom. And I know there's going to be a lot of objections, but that is where I genuinely feel like Dr. Doom is in the game right now. He was one of my earlier rank 5 champions, and now he's one of the 6 stars I haven't even ascended. And, you know, I probably will at some point. But honestly speaking, he just isn't it. You see him hardly ever getting used now for Alliance Wars, and even less so in Battlegrounds, aside from a couple of metas that we have had recently where nullification power control was fairly important. But even with all that, he just doesn't have the intimidation factor. He is a champion that I think was designed pretty much perfect for his time and place in the game. He has absurdly good base stats. He has absurdly well-balanced abilities for a Mystic champion. There's power control, there's nullification, there are like the staggers and access to shock, access to incinerate, tons of safety, and you know, plenty of immunities, and he just seems like an amazing champion on paper, and he has been. But he's more and more falling into the same place where APOC is, where what he does in the game just isn't what's required at the highest levels of the game. And don't get me wrong, just like many other champions who didn't make this list, he could absolutely carry you through a ton of story content, through, you know, several challenge modes and stuff like that. But at the highest levels of the game, you know, you don't really see him that much. And that is because, unfortunately, kind of, because he's not out as a 7-star, and because of that, his speed, which in short fights wasn't the best to begin with, is suffering even further. Defensive value is being, you know, destroyed with the fact that he just doesn't exist as a 7-star. And then also, you know, he's just not fast enough. That's it. And one of the hallmarks of using Dr. Doom was the sense that you are always in constant control, that you were toying with your opponent. But now with block penetration becoming like a standard defensive stat focus for champions, Dr. Doom is, you know, starting to take more and more chip and block damage from 7-star rank 3s. And he doesn't feel as chunky anymore either. Again, another champion that I do think will absolutely shine if and when released as a 7-star, because he is also absolutely viable unawakened and at low sig. But as of right now, he definitely has been on a downward trend. Unfortunately, the same thing with Abs. I already alluded to that. Maybe I did overestimate him in the previous Mystic champion ranking by placing him at the very top. But at that time, it genuinely felt like he was doing everything. Like, he was countering all the major defensive threats. Like, he was a staple in every deck in almost every meta competitively. We, and myself included, used him a ton for Alliance Wars. And he just did what the game needed a champion to do at that time. He destroyed, you know, specifically all those armor break champions as well, which is quite crazy. But overall, just a Mystic that, you know, didn't rely on buffs, debuffs, that could crit or have alternate passive damage sources that had plenty of regen. He also had a ton of defensive value, which since has evaporated because everybody has gotten like very chill and comfortable fighting him. And as an end result, in combination with the AI issues and intercepting becoming more risky and more tricky to do, and recovery times of AI becoming faster, so, you know, punishing opponents' heavies with your own heavies and stuff like that can become significantly more challenging now. He just isn't up there at the moment. We do see him get used, again, now and then, at a time, but he's not a champion that people rush to rank up when they pull him for most part, or he's not a champion that people rush to ascend. He's not a champion that sees anywhere close to the playing time that he used to 6 months ago. He still does well as and when he's needed, but it's more of a specific tool for a specific situation type of thing. Then moving on to spot number 8, and that's the Hood. And the Hood, unfortunately, again, is going to be on a slight decline from this point forward. I feel like the Hood's heyday was about 2 to 3 months ago when 7-star rank 3s weren't as popular, and 6-star rank 6 Hood could effectively, deal with just about anybody, because in between his power control, his buff control, and the unique way that he does damage and his phasing, he was putting in tons of work for several of the metas, for several of the Alliance War seasons. But now, it's just becoming a bit too much for him. I would have wanted to place him higher. Actually, I was planning to place him higher, but then I realized myself that he just isn't quite reachy enough. Because Hood's one of those champions where you have like a certain amount of health that you can take down very efficiently in a fight, and then you kind of hit the wall, and then it goes very, very slowly. It's kind of like with these big level 2 offload champions like Morbius. Like, if your level 2 doesn't kill, you could possibly have to double your fight duration because you're building up to another level 2, even if opponent's only at like 10 or 15% health. And it's kind of similar with Hood. And the fact that there are more 7-star rank 3s that he cannot just quite reach with a single heavy attack detonation kind of moves into that area. Despite all that, he's still solid counter to Maestros, to Serpents. A ton of very weird and random matchups are being done incredibly well by him as well. He has some secret weapons that a lot of people do not realize he does as well. For instance, his Fate Seal is also preventing opponents' ability accuracy by 65%. And that's ability accuracy, that's just not defensive or offensive ability accuracy. So it effectively means it's almost like 2 Archangel neurotoxins on the opponent. And a lot of opponents' abilities are going to fail once you have that Fate Seal on. There is a bit of randomness involved with him, which is like the one thing that I don't enjoy about the champion. But at the same time, one of the coolest things about him is that previously, the bullet mechanic, I always found it to be incredibly clunky. As in, like, it is one thing that prevented Hood from being a great questioning champion under generic situations. Because if you're going up against large opponents and do not have a ton of synergies, you'll often run out of bullets after 1 or 2 fights. In Battlegrounds and in Alliance War, it hardly matters. So that alone is, has been one of those aspects that let Hood absolutely shine. It's a similar happenstance like with Human Torch and his no flame ability, where it was never intended to be available for every fight. And I feel like Hood kind of got lucky with the design of the game mode as well. But overall, absolutely love the champion. Do wish to see him as a 7-star as soon as possible. The unfortunate bit is that Hood does quite rely on that Awakened ability and Sig to be as high as possible, because that affects how much power you are stealing from the opponent. Well, it affects how often you're stealing power from the opponent. So that is going to be significant. But nonetheless, the sooner we get Hood in the game as 7-star, the better, I feel. Now, champions that did become available as 7-star and that did increase his role, then that's Longshot. With Longshot, it's actually very simple and straightforward. He can be defensively very, very pesky champion, especially once he's like mid to high Sig, because he will be stealing buffs and nullifying, and then if you push him to level 2, well, he has Beauty of Hearts active, which is not that hard to do in fights, trust me. You kind of just get hooked. So he's one of those champions that you always need to be wary of defensively as well, and then he's an offensive nuke. Top it all off, he recently did get released as a 7-star. We do see him casually strolling around at like 7-star rank 2 and rank 3 level all the time. I do have 7-star rank 2 myself. And yeah, Longshot is definitely still having a very, very solid place in the game. He's still visible, and he's pretty much living his best life as an MCOC champion right now, I feel. Which is, cool. All the more power to him. And that's pretty much all there is to it. It's still present, and his stock being released as a 7-star has just gone up for the most part. Now, spot number 6 will be Weable by Night. Weable by Night hopefully is about to become even more popular once the double medium hit in the block parry issue gets resolved. But ultimately, Weable by Night definitely started very slow, but has taken speed and is doing great right now. I would say at the moment he is, again, one of the more desirable Mystic champions in the game, because ironically enough, it's mainly his attack. On defense, he kind of can be annoying, but he's not the greatest defender. When he initially was released, I kind of saw him as like a Sasquatch light, because he seemed like to have a lot of the same mechanics in between unstoppable, then unblockable, and power gain and rupture access and regen and stuff like that. So I kind of thought he's going to be similar to Sasquatch, being also super chunky, not quite as chunky as Sasquatch, but still. But ultimately, it turned out that he's almost entirely an offensive champion. And that's kind of cool. And that he's kind of like Mystic Valkyrie, where you can pretty much finish the fights and finish the opponents with largely hitting opponents' block only by howling, inflicting tons of raptures, passively gaining, power up to your level 2, ramping up, dropping a massive level 2, and then, finishing them off quickly. He is out as a 7-star, which is super helpful, as well as the fact that he isn't overly reliant on his Awakened ability. And yeah, I do think he, again, offers something new and something interesting and something super useful to the Mystic class, which is one champion, one of the very few champions that deals a tremendous amount of damage hitting through block. So up until now, the block damage and block effects were kind of largely viewed as a skill ability in between Massacre and Valkyrie and a handful of other champions that worked perfectly fine hitting through block. And now we do have that in Mystic class, which again is super useful. And my favorite thing about Werewolf by Night is that 1 week a month, when the full moon is on, he becomes absolutely OP. Like, he's a very solid, good champion, 3 weeks a month, and then there's this 1 week a month where he starts with 3 charges, which effectively lets him bypass his level 1, level 2 rotation and just go straight to level 2. And that makes him significantly faster, significantly more dangerous, both offensively and defensively. There are obviously big ups and downs for this, but effectively, even if meta isn't too compatible with Werewolf by Night, when the full moon's on, I pretty much always tend to add him to the deck because he can just be such a monster with that level 2, with those raptures, and with that much shorter ramp. It's not a mechanic I'd like to see in many more champions, where you have to think about what time of the month it is and stuff like that. But it absolutely is, being super helpful for Werewolf when it does work and when the full moon's on. Move on to number 5, it's Tiger. And I'm very sorry to say this, but I think Tiger is on its way down. I think we are receiving more and more champions who bypass Tiger because they have conspicuously increased ability, accuracy, and cosmic class, and so on and so forth. And then the AI is just absolutely screwing her over. I've had so many fights recently against, let's say, Onslaught, where Onslaught just drops 3 combos in my block. I can't get a heavy in, my senses fall off, and I'm just dead. Onslaught fight used to be a very reliable 30-35 second nuke. Only thing you had to do is effectively bait out 3 or 4 heavy attacks, punish them with your own heavies, and then nuke Onslaught. Now, I fail more often than I succeed with it. And that that goes with more and more champions. Because when you're holding block, champions randomly start throwing special attacks and you end up eating it or having to dex it. When you're holding block and baiting out heavy attacks, opponents just refuse to throw it. Opponents are getting magically better and better at dexing Tiger mid-special attack as well. And there are just so many things coming together that's making me feel like Tiger is more and more unreliable. Previously, when I drafted Tiger or when I used Tiger, I was super confident that I'm going to nuke this fight if I knew that matchup. Now, when I draft Tiger, I'm kind of worried because I know that I know the matchup. I know exactly what to do. I have no idea whether the AI is going to allow me to do it. And that has been a massive problem for Tiger, without a doubt. Still present, still can be quite cool. I had 36 second or 40 second Serpent takedown in this current meta recently, and you can do amazing things with Tiger, without a doubt. But it's just nowhere near as consistent as it used to be. Additionally, she's not a 7-star and being fairly flimsy champion, and with her playstyle involving often block baiting out heavy attacks and taking some chip damage, the chip damage adds up quite drastically, and it's becoming harder and harder to use again because of AI and everything else. And I just kind of feel like she's on her way down up until we do get her as 7-star and 6 stones become more available and things like that. For now, still absolutely destroying stuff, but again, significantly less consistently than she used to. So, demotion for Tiger. Promotion though for Sasquatch, because sorry about that. Because Sasquatch is just a monster. Sasquatch is one of those Mystic champions you see as a 7-star rank 3 most commonly. That alone is one of the indicators that he is tremendously valuable. And this is another thing that we are using here as evaluation of the champions. Like, which of these champions are actually, properly visible as 7-star rank 3s in majority of your matches? And Sasquatch is definitely one of them. He has a ton of defensive value, mainly because he's just fat. Like, Sasquatch has insane amount of health. And then on top of it all, he has damage mitigation with his charges, wrath charges. And then on top of it all, he also can be solid offensively. Like, I have done some crazy good matches with Sasquatch as well as an attacker. Can be a little bit inconsistent because you do not have much control when he enters Wrath or 10 rack. But overall, he can deliver as an attacker for sure and does so. One of those champions that absolutely forces you to have a great counter for that you might not never see on defense anyways. And even if you have a good counter, many of the matchups still, take a while to take him down. So when it comes to which Mystic champions are getting the most love from players, I do think deservedly Sassy is in the top 4 of that conversation. And I don't think it should be controversial even at this point. So we are just going to move on. Spot number 3, I'm going to give to the asshole, the dickhead, the absolute wanker that keeps avoiding my deck, that keeps avoiding my account, and that's Juggernaut. The thing about Juggernaut is brutal. Like, if he can do a fight, he's just about the fastest champion in the game. In like Battlegrounds level fights. And he's great for questing, he's great for a whole bunch of other things. I actually have had tremendous time with him in Incursion, but realistically, his glow up is centered on Battlegrounds, not Lions War, not other game modes. It's quite handy, and he is quite good for like questing and a whole bunch of other stuff, but let's not get here. Juggernaut is the champion we know him to be today because of Battlegrounds. And the fact that he is not only just about the fastest offensive champion in the game, or one of the fastest offensive champions in the game, he's also one that's super easy to play, because with Unstoppable you have a ton of room for error. He has a fairly potent damage mitigation for whenever his gem is active, you take less damage as is already, and in between the Unstoppable buffs, you can have a better chance of correcting your mistakes. Then on top of it all, with the relic, you have the ability to heal the cheap damage of all of that too. When awakened, he does have nullification abilities, he has stagger, but really it's all about the level 2 nuke. And that's it. Like, the last thing that makes him the champion that he is the fact that he matches up well with a ton of defenders. His offensive dominance has been lessened between Serpent, between Bullseye, between Photon. But the fact that he destroys just about anybody else who isn't like those 4 champions, is still brutal. You cannot draft a Korg, for instance, when Juggernaut is around. You cannot draft a Nick Fury because Juggernaut is going to destroy that. You cannot draft so many champions because, it is very ridiculously hard to compete with the speed of Juggernaut. And obviously, he has his downsides. As I mentioned, he doesn't take too well to some of the more recent defensive matches, but he still destroys everything else just about the fastest. And any debuffs, he's allergic to. Like, in the current meta, Juggernaut is an insane gamble. Either you're going to destroy something very, very quick, or you're going to struggle a lot. But, that's Juggy. That's life. And I love the guy, but I also hate the guy. I have been after him since he has been released in the game as 7-star, and I still don't have a 7-star. That's brutal. Alright, fine, whatever. Second best Mystic, I think, is Kushala. I think Kushala has slowly but surely risen through the ranks and ended up being as one of the most popular, one of the most dominant Mystic champions in the game right now. And the reason for her is that she seems to work against everything that we need her to work. Like, she can take the Bullseye, she can take the Serpents, she can take Maestros, she can take a ridiculous array of champions. She can be good versus Korgs. She's very solid domino counter, and she seems to answer when we need her. On top of it, she's not like the fastest offensive champion, but she does have fairly stable attacking speed. Also, she takes advantage of Mystic Dispersion in a way no other Mystic champion can, because we are getting more and more permanent buffs, and that gives her power, unlike regular champions' Mystic Dispersion when they would expire or get nullified. So whatever buffs are involved, she always gets like a leg up and gets extra power. And then if you do keep those buffs on, obviously you can turn it in extra amount of damage. A lot of people don't actually know one of the coolest things about Kushala is the fact that as long as you have Blessing of Wisdom active, you can block unblockable attacks from non-science champions and passively regenerate, you know, a lot of damage. So she actually turns out to be very chunky, because when you get 3 of these active, which is super easy, you regenerate 75, well, with Recovery Mastery, even more than that amount of damage that you take on block, and can block all unblockable hits from non-science champions. That is special and basic attacks. That's superbly helpful. Then you also have AI modification, where you do make AI more aggressive, and you can lower their ability power rate by increasing yours as well with the intercept. So overall, I just think she has, again, it started out fairly slow and conservative. I wasn't super sold on her, but at the moment, she's one of my rank 3s, and I absolutely do not regret it. Such a great champion that just seems, it's kind of like Warlock-esque ability, where she seems to work an incredible amount of time. And then, lastly, we need to talk about America Chavez, who I think is the best Mystic champion in the game. I'm gonna be 100% honest here. America Chavez was one of my earlier rank 3s as well, and I think it's the best rank up I ever did. America Chavez has been the most helpful champion to my account, bar none. She has been great for Alliance War attack. She obviously is present in Alliance War defense. She's great in Battlegrounds attack, Battlegrounds defense. She's great in a lot of random quests and challenges. Her power control is absolutely ridiculous. And in between all of it, she works when many other champions don't, because she can get easy knockdowns with her passive stand into combos. She has tons of power gain. She has tons of damage. She has regeneration. And she doesn't rely on debuffs or buffs. And she just puts in work. That's about it. Like, I don't think I need to discuss Chavez at this point, because anybody who has ranked her up knows exactly how useful and great she is. Takes a ton of ridiculous matchups, and she does it incredibly well. She's one of the best Serpent counters alongside Kushala. She absolutely destroys champions she shouldn't be able to. And she does it, you know, fairly effortlessly, fairly safe. And again, she just always seems to work. And I do think she has more defensive value than Kushala does. And I do think she works slight amount more, and she can be nukier than Kushala. So I do think both of them are absolutely great, and they do their own things in different ways. But again, I just think America Chavez has been my best 7-star rank up so far, for sure, without a doubt. And I think she's the best Mystic in the game. So that is my current Mystic list. We will refresh your memory. So I do think Chavez is up top, Kushala second, Juggernaut is the third, fourth is Sasquatch, fifth is Tiger, sixth is Wolf, seventh is Longshot, eighth is the Hood, then we have Absorbing Man and Dr. Doom. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the next